Welcome to the Artistic Foodies, the show that explores life through the lens of art and food. I'm Abbas Mohamed,
And I'm Irfan Rydhan.
and today we're talking about Halal Meat Certification with Shaykh Jabir Tarin of HFSAA, the Halal Food Standards Alliance of America. HFSAA is a well known and respected halal certifying body that started in the San Francisco Bay Area and now certifies halal restaurants across many metropolitan areas of the U.S. We talk about the process of getting certified, explore differences between hand and machine slaughtered halal, and reflect on how far the halal meat industry and the food scene has evolved over the last few decades.
Shaykh Jabir Tarin is a registered associate marriage and family therapist. He has served as a teacher at several Islamic institutions, including Dua Seminary, where he teaches the Islamic sciences, and Noor Institute. Sheikh Jabir's professional interests include providing mental well being and spiritual direction to the city of Fremont, integrating Islamic spirituality and mental wellness, and teaching Islamic theology to young adults and college students. He started working with Hafsa in 2010 as an inspector, then as a director of chapter development, and now has added halal food educator to his list of titles.
Tell me about your relationship with food. Do you cook? What is your relationship with cooking? What is your relationship with food? And how'd you get involved into Hafsa? Let's give us the backstory of the superhero.
Yeah, no, well, honestly, actually, my history with food personally is that I've always enjoyed trying to get involved more in cooking and actually being involved. I would certainly say in more recent years, I've gotten a lot more interested, particularly in meats and different cuts of meats, and learning a lot more about that. Ironically, I've been working with Hafsa now coming on 14 years, and mashallah, it's been an awesome journey for me. It's something that I'm extremely passionate about. I love this work and I love this whole science and the field of it. But my own personal food journey, I guess you could say, started just in more recent times. I think it comes with marriage and kids and more responsibility. You kind of end up finding yourself in the kitchen a little more often. So you try to make the best of it. So yeah, yeah. And then, of course, the way I got connected to Hafsa was, as a matter of fact, it wasn't in a very direct way. It was more indirect. As a matter of fact, Mufti Abdullah Nana, who is the founder, one of the founders of the organization, religious director, he actually was doing a series, like just some Islamic lecture series at one of the local masjids, and I happened to be there. And after, as is the case with most scholars, they get inundated with just random questions, right? After the class is over, or the program's over, a bunch of young guys get together and they just sort of ask Sheikh all sorts of things, like, "Is this okay? And what about this? And what about jinns and all sort of stuff?" So myself and a dear friend of mine, we kept doing that with Mufti Abdullah, and his programs were ongoing for like 6, 7 weeks. And it just so happened that that was around the time that he started Hafsa and started the organization. So we started asking about that, and that's when we really got involved, and that's sort of when everything sort of came together for us. Then we started getting more involved, learning a lot more about the organization, and then he had the first ever conference in Mill Valley at the Mill Valley Masjid, and it was there that we were formally introduced to Hafsa, the people involved with Hafsa, and the good work that they're doing.
Mashallah, it's beautiful that this journey came about so organically.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, when things happen like that, it's not like, oh yeah, you put in an application or resume, but rather this is something that naturally has become a part of your life. It's
for
always
sure.
amazing to witness stuff like that. And thank God for marriage. It put you in the kitchen, right? I mean, personally, personally, I'm evangelical about this mission of Muslim men need to cook. Muslim men need to learn how to cook. If you don't know how, type in HalalFest quarantine cooking. You'll see all of my Ramadan videos. I'll teach you how to make samosas, karai, mango faluda. Forget about it. Anything you need, man. This is the hill that I'm gonna die on. So I'm really glad that that life has created situations that placed you in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I think definitely I may not be as skilled as mashallah some of the sisters and some of the brothers are out there, but definitely with certain grilling, certain steaks, certain cuts, I think that's kind of where I found my niche, and I've really sort of began to appreciate that and enjoy that a lot more. So, and I can certainly tell you that a well done steak is very different than a medium rare steak. And, it took a lot of convincing, I think, but ultimately, once you kind of cross that path in life, there's just no going back.
Alhamdulillah, this is how we heal the intergenerational trauma of well
Yeah,
done steaks.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay, well, jumping back to Hafsa for a second here, we have this Facebook group which I think you're familiar with called the Bay Area Halal Foodies, and we have a lot of discussions on there, as you know.
Hmm.
So some of the questions that come up with people ask um, is something does something have to be Hafsa certified to be actually considered halal, or what's the difference between Hafsa certified halal meat and other halal meats which are certified by other organizations?
Yeah, and this is one of those common questions, right? This is one of the ones that we received all the time. I mean, almost really from the inception of Hafsa's existence, this question came about, right? Are you redefining halal? Are you setting the definitive meaning of the word so that if it's not in line with your program, then does that mean unequivocally now it's haram for consumption? So what I would say to that, and of course I understand I'm representing the organization here in saying this, but it's our organization's stance and Hafsa's stance that we don't claim that any product not certified is automatically haram. This has never been our stance. This has never been our position. And so, absolutely, a product can be halal if it's not Hafsa certified. And the primary difference here is that people interpret the word halal or zabiha very differently. And one of the goals of Hafsa, you know, is one of the primary goals of Hafsa is to set a standard, a specific standard by which certain people are aligned with or inclined to. And those are the standards that we've identified, which, for example, are hand cut, by a Muslim who recites the tasmiyah at the time of slaughter. That would be sort of the basis for our standards moving, and that's kind of what we would classify as being Hafsa certified. Other people have often said, oh, well, that's how we slaughter back home. Okay, sure, that's right. But then the idea is that because we live in a globalized and a very sort of the world has become like open borders when it comes to understanding this definition. Oftentimes, there are new definitions that come out for the word zabiha, for the word halal. And we have nothing really to say as an organization to those other organizations. However, all we can stick to is our standards, which are what we are sharing with others and promoting to others. I think people can look at something which is much mechanically slaughtered. I think people look at other methods of slaughter, kosher. People look at the way the animal is slaughtered, the environment that the animal was brought up in. All those various factors go into other organizations' definitions. But I guess just to bring it back, we have never held a position that if it's not Hafsa, it's not halal. So it can be halal, but Hafsa's sort of standards are, if you look at it in the majority of the world, generally speaking, right? I say this generally speaking. If you take an animal, you take the name of Allah, a Muslim comes with a sharp blade and he slaughters the animal, cutting across the throat, the jugular vein, the esophagus, the trachea, then that would be considered halal, and that would be the product that everybody would be comfortable eating with. Now, where does the varying differences of opinion start from? It starts the moment we deviate from that traditional practice. Why? And again, I'm not saying here that it's wrong. I'm saying where does the differences come from? It comes from when it's not that method. And so the inclusion of, mechanically soldered, the inclusion of shocking, the inclusion of using a gun or using a bolt or whatever it may be, that's where the differences come up. And certain organizations decided that they're comfortable with some versus others. So to each their own. But for those who are interested in this particular methodology that HFSA has adopted, that's kind of what we're continuing our education with.
Because none of the technologies that you mentioned were present during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. None of them were present when halal was being defined, when zabiha was being defined. So all of these new things, it's like you got to be like, well, is this okay or
Right.
is this not? And so basically, from what I'm understanding, is what Hafsa says is we're going to go with the traditional method. Anything that has a question mark, we'll leave that for other people to figure out. We're going to be, playing it safe, playing it tradish,
Yeah, for
100%
the most part.
tradish.
I would certainly say that I think that, there are modern issues that come up that require scholars and a body of scholars to investigate and say, hey, is there any scope in the religion for this? And I think what's amazing about our faith is that there is so much room within it to explore and see, is there really room in this or not? And I'm very grateful to be connected to such scholars who are in that investigative field, and they are muftis and they're researching, and they're, this whole thing about lab grown meat, right? That's a prime example of this, right? Lab grown meat is a new thing. It's a modern issue that came about, and having
Mhm.
scholars research that, it's incredibly important. And having a fatwa on that and knowing where we stand on that, knowing where we go with that, it's something that, it requires that deep research. So I don't want to sound like, any new advancements in technology, software, maybe production or whatever, helps us totally against it. All I'm
Mhm.
suggesting is that it does require a deep investigation from the right and correct religious body to do that investigation. And in this case, it'd be the muftis. And if they give the green light based on their research, then we would consider that as well. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think also what's really fascinating, especially with some of these newer things, newer practices, newer technologies, is like it's all brand new. Everyone's trying to figure it out at the same time, and so
Yeah.
you know, oftentimes I found that not every Islamic scholar is going to come to the same conclusion.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you have the whole wide spectrum from hand slaughtered meat only, all the way to, well, we're living in a Christian country. It's the people of the book, so everything is okay.
Right.
So it's very, and here's what's fascinating is because growing up, it was always just like, oh, we're right and everyone else is ridiculous. But growing up and using a little bit of critical thinking and realizing, well, everyone is trying to figure this out simultaneously. We're not all going to reach the same conclusion. That's natural. And so there's a little bit of and I try to shy away from this word, but there's like a little bit of pluralism within the
Mm.
jurisprudence of these modern issues, which is very fascinating to me.
It is. It is. And I would go so far as to say that the ikhtilaf and the various differences amongst scholars in the interpretation of the ahadith and in the interpretation of the, understanding of some of these things can be considered a mercy, because there's different ways that the
Hmm.
sunnah can be implemented in practice. And I think that I don't want to go too deeply into the scholarly point of the discussion, but I will say this much, that I consider a great blessing to know that we have scholars that dedicated time and energy and effort to make this their whole thing, their whole world, is
Mm.
identifying options for Muslims to, what they can consume, what they can't consume. The whole issue of like reading ingredients on the back of packages has always been an issue that's plagued people for like years, right? So having brothers and sisters who are from the Muslim community, who do this research, who know the limitations of what Muslims can or can't consume, and then being able to work in tandem with scholars is a fantastic, is an absolutely amazing blessing. So I'm actually proud to say that, like with Hafsa, we have like these, ingredient specialists who this is their work. Like literally, their full time job is send them dozens upon dozens of ingredients, have them do the back end research, cross reference with scholars to see, what is the percentage of acceptability of this or that. If its origins are from dates or from grapes, is there permission for us to use that, permissibility in that, and then drawing that from all of those conclusions, we then can make an official statement regarding it.
Hmm.
It's really for making it easier on the Muslim community. Because if you think about it from the point of view that, well, what if that didn't exist? It'd be a guessing game all over again, back like how it was in, whatever the early 2000s, maybe early 90s even, right? Everyone's just trying to figure things out on their own. There is always horror stories, right, to everything, but then there's always there's also a positive side to things. So
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting also, and like going back to the 80s, the 90s, a lot of stories that we hear like, oh well, there were no halal meat stores. We had to go an hour and a half, and we didn't at that time know about halal hand cut and halal machine cut, and things were simple, and there was just this one thing. But of course, ignorance isn't something to be strived for. So now we have the knowledge, we have the understanding. I think probably one of the most polarizing and divisive labels that I've seen people get into fights about is machine cut versus hand cut. And so you knew this question was going to come up. I'd love to know some education, some background. If you could let us know
absolutely.
what is machine cut, what is hand cut, why are so many people okay with a machine cut? What is superior, and why? Like, take us a little bit into the philosophy of it,
Yeah, yeah, no,
of these
that's a very
systems.
good question. And honestly, I feel personally like as much as I've answered this question, I get happy when people ask this question only because here's the thing. Even though as an organization, we only support the hand cut methodology for our proteins, it's very important that people understand what both of these systems are that are in effect so that they can make an informed decision. Okay. And our part and our role as an organization is to provide both the education behind it, which is primarily my role now, working with Hafsa, education, but also so that people can learn more about what literally they're consuming. Because, of course, as Muslims, we believe that the food that we eat not only has a physical benefit to our health, but it's also incredibly spiritual. And I've had multiple conversations with people in the past, non-Muslims even, where I've shared that to tell a Muslim that we'll cook something on the side for you or something like that, and we'll cross contaminate it, or we only have one set of utensils for you. I'm sorry, you have to share. It's literally like part and parcel of their faith. So to take food out of the equation is like cutting a Muslim's spirituality in half, right? It's so significant. It's so important. So just to get back down to the details of the question, right, which is what is hand soldered, what is machine soldered? So hand soldered, like I just mentioned earlier, it is to have a sharp blade. A Muslim who pronounces the name of Allah, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, at the time of slaughter, cutting the animal at the neck, cutting the carotid arteries, the jugular vein, the esophagus, and the trachea, preferably and ideally in one cut, rendering the animal unconscious as the animal bleeds out. And this is considered the hand slaughtered method, or you can say the orthodox method of slaughter. And this is what you could say also that is probably the majority of Muslims around the world would, if they witness this, they would understand what that is. Okay. Now, what machine, and again, the idea here with hand cut is that if anybody, even if they hold a different opinion, the idea is that if everybody just saw that, nobody would have a difference of opinion on whether or not they could eat that meat, right?
Right.
That's the idea here. So you know that that's happening. Let's just say you witnessed it. Let's say it's Eid al-Adha and you were there at the farm and you saw somebody doing that. I think nobody would have an objection with that. Whatever background you come from, whatever madhab you follow, whatever it is, you'd see that you'd be like, we're good to go. Now, where that changes, like I mentioned earlier as well, is that once we deviate from that practice, anything else that's included now becomes a question. So, what machine slaughter is in particular, and just to clarify, machine slaughter is a practice which is done for poultry. So, generally, it's done for chickens. I would imagine it's probably possible to do also for turkeys and ducks as well. Although, right off the top, I can't think of any particular plant that I've seen, but it's done for poultry, and it,
Is it
yeah,
only chicken? So machine cut, hand cut doesn't even apply to things like lamb and
that's
beef
right.
and goat.
That's right. Exactly. So
So when someone is asking, is this machine slaughtered or hand slaughtered beef? They're going off of.
that's right. They're kind of
Interesting.
piggybacking
Wow.
off of that chicken issue. And so I often tell people, listen, if you're concerned about hand cut, there's another issue which we'll get into for
Yeah.
beef, and that's
Oh
actually
boy.
called a vertical cut, right? That's a totally
Yeah.
separate issue altogether. But in any case, we'll highlight this for now, which is that what does machine slaughter look like? So, having seen a machine slaughter in practice, what you can expect is just like in any, let's just say, a commercial slaughterhouse, you'll have birds hung by their feet, alive on a conveyor belt, and as they're passing by, in a hand cut facility, you'll have Muslim slaughtermen standing there, grabbing the bird right by the throat and cutting, and saying Bismillah Akbar, grabbing the chickens and just cutting, right? And they take turns. Usually you have 7 to 10 slaughtermen, Muslim slaughtermen, and they're constantly, you just see their lips moving. Bismillah Allahu Akbar, Bismillah Allahu Akbar, Bismillah Allahu Akbar. In a machine slaughter facility, what you'll find is those same birds are hung upside down, right, by their feet on the conveyor belt. And as they're going, there's a stationary rotary blade that's just spinning. And as the birds come by upside down, their necks get cut by this rotary blade. And the conveyor belt keeps moving and the blade is spinning and it's just cutting every single bird as it passes by. Now that's what the machine slaughter method looks like. I don't want this conversation to kind of go in any particular direction, but oftentimes, and at least in America, seldom will you find some of the things that are found in the traditional hand cut method also found in the machine slaughter. And what I mean by that is oftentimes the tasmiyah recited by a Muslim present at the time of slaughter is usually absent. And I think the challenge is that if you've never been to a machine slaughter facility, all of the ideas and the understanding behind the concept become theoretical and a little bit more like philosophical almost, because you're trying to conceptualize what's taking place there without actually having been there and seen there. Again, at the same time, the purpose of me explaining this is educational, to be very just direct about it and clear, that oftentimes you find that there isn't someone standing there directly at the rotary blade, saying Bismillah, saying the name of Allah, perhaps even the Muslim present on the kill line. That's questionable as well, and that can be a challenge oftentimes. But in practice, by and large, that's what the difference between hand cut and machine slaughter. And why, of course, there's a difference of opinion between the two is because of some of these arguments, which is that, is there a Muslim present at the time of slaughter? Is the name of Allah being taken at the time of slaughter? What makes that bird halal if we're missing some of the key components that we understand makes a protein halal at the time of slaughter? So when that's missing now, what then validates the authenticity of that product for halal consumption? And that's where the differences of opinion come up. And there's a whole take on that, which we don't necessarily need to get into, but there's so much that can be said there. And so there you see the clear division. There's two camps, right? The machine slaughter camp and the hand slaughter camp. And that's kind of the main takeaways from it.
It's really interesting education. I appreciate you painting the picture.
Yeah.
A gruesome but necessary picture. um, because it's so divisive and so polarizing, oftentimes you have people who are like, okay, yes, this is the camp that I'm in, and if you're in that camp, then you're wrong and you're doing sin. And so I'm wondering now, okay, so we've defined halal hand cut, we've defined halal machine cut, we've acknowledged that different scholars have different opinions. Now, how about the etiquette of dealing with the other camp? So that's where
Yeah.
that's where a lot of, I think, because otherwise it wouldn't be polarized. It'd be like, okay, cool, you have this practice, you have this, okay, you only do Jummah wearing a kufi, okay, I don't, like, there's no people getting in fights over that, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I agree with you. And I'll say that I think ever since this sort of education began happening all those 14 years ago, I think this has been some of those, I don't know, side effects of some maybe really overzealous community members who um, tend to think that this may be like a type of competition of sorts, or maybe even like a kind of, I don't know, like right versus wrong. And honestly, what I'll say is this, that our organization, again, the objectives are very clear. We are promoting a very particular type of product through a particular slaughter method and through a specific system. And that's what we are promoting, and that's what we are verifying through our certification process. At no point, I think, ever did do we ever sort of encourage the community, nor do we ever kind of give off this sentiment that, now everybody go and do their own individual investigation, barge into restaurants, go into the back kitchen, bust out receipts, and push this onto store owners that, hey, I need to see everything. And I've heard the horror stories, right? I've certainly been there, and I'll share a story that hopefully explains this sentiment. When I started with Hafsa all those years back, and Mufti Abdullah Nana was my mentor and he was training me, I remember one of the first stores that we had certified. Of course, I won't mention any names, but one of the first, it was a grocery store that we had certified. And the store owner was real excited about it and he was real happy about it. And so he wanted us to come in and do the weekly inspections like we normally do and had the receipts ready for us. And it just so happened a few months into the certification, for whatever reason, the store owner started to have doubts about bringing in only hand slaughtered. And he brought his own reasons for it, and I won't mention them, but he brought his own reasons for them. And so he would stop coming to the store, and instead his employees would just be there all the time. So once I went for my regular inspections and I saw the employee and he was trying to hide from me. And finally I flagged him down and I said, "Hey, I'm just here. You've seen me for like 3 months now. I'm just here doing the same thing. It's a new week. I'm doing my inspection." And it wasn't a busy time, right? We take all that into consideration, go on the off hour where it's not rush hour. And and then finally he comes out and he goes, "Hey, look, I'm really sorry, but the store owner, he was purchasing meat, let's say chicken in this instance, once a week before you guys. Now he's purchasing 3 times a week, right? His orders have come in literally at 3 times the amount that he was before. And now he's trying to maximize off of that and capitalize off of that by putting in some machine slaughtered meat in here as well." And so mixing hand cut and machine cut is not a Hafsa policy. And also, it's much cheaper, right? Machine slaughter is cheaper than hand cut because of the lack of physical labor for the physical cutting. So ultimately, we had to go through our process and we had to pull their certificate because there was proof and we saw the boxes and the delivery guy came in and he admitted to it, etc. So we have a clause in our certificate contract that talks about that, we would charge a sort of a breaking the contract fee because you decided to switch out, etc., and change your products. Well, what ended up happening, which is very interesting, is I went to go tell Mufti Abdullah this, and I said, "Hey, Mufti Sab, this restaurant, they did this. I'm ready to catch them. We caught them. Let's go in and just call them out and put them on blast, etc." And I'll never forget the advice that he gave me, right? And he said to me, he said, "Jabir, our goal is not to put people on blast. Our goal is not to be like FBI investigators. Our goal is to go and help the community who want to do hand cut to carry hand cut." And so, I know we have that clause in the contract, but forget about the clause. Maybe the guy is going through something. Maybe he needs to switch things up for him. Remove the certificate, do that part of it, but there's no need to make a scene about it. There's no need to, charge him some fee. There's no need to make a whole announcement about like the fact that this guy is X, Y, and Z, is a crook, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, treat everyone with kindness and treat them with the respect that they deserve. They're trying to run a business. And I was blown away because I had gotten into the heat of like, oh, okay, I'm the investigator and I'm gonna go and catch this person, etc. But Mufti Abdullah really humbled me in that moment. And that has really basically shaped not only my understanding of the organization and the inspections and all the work that we do, but every other inspector that comes on board that I personally train, I share this exact same thing with them. That listen, even if the store owner gets upset, you calmly excuse yourself and say, "You know what? I'm sorry that you're upset. I'm going to go ahead and leave and I'll let Jabir know." We have a very firm policy against harshness, rudeness, bad character, bad akhlaq with our store owners, because at the end of the day, these are all our largely are Muslim business owners, and we want them to succeed. We want them to do good. Hey, look, I get just as excited as anybody else when we get a new restaurant opening up in the Bay Area, right? Especially when it's a new cuisine. The last thing that I want is for someone to be, ticked off because of someone's bad or poor character, right? So, as far as Hafsa is concerned, and our own staff and our own employee and our own sentiments, we have an absolutely zero tolerance policy for that type of negative behavior, whether in person or online, right? Let's connect that to the Bay Area chat, right? Like the Facebook group. We have a zero tolerance policy on that. And I communicate this to my inspectors, my volunteers. I always mention that to them. Always have good character. Always have good character. Don't respond harshly, because you never know. Maybe this week, or sorry, this year, it might be tough on a store owner to carry hand cut only. And perhaps in the next year and the year after that, maybe they'd want to make the switch over, and we want to be there to support them, right? As for, however, it's worth mentioning, as for other people in the community that are just overly excited and they take action, of course, you can't be responsible for the actions of others. Of course, we do education. We constantly share this, that the best way to people's hearts is through good character. So, treat people well. If somebody decides to interpret that totally differently and take things on a different route, unfortunately, while we're sad that that happens, we never condone such actions. We never support those sort of actions. And it's just an unfortunate reality of, I guess, the world that we live in right now. So I hope that makes it clear.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Located just down the road from MCA in Santa Clara, Krusty Pizza and Pasta is a family owned restaurant and caterer that serves 100% hand slaughtered halal meats. Besides their well known pizzas such as the garlic chicken and the carnivore pizza, they also offer a diverse menu including pastas, burgers, lamb chops, and weekend specials. Weekend specials are always changing, but have regularly featured unique, authentic offerings including mendi, nihari, paya, and freshly baked naans made right in their pizza oven. Check them out online at krustypizza.com or call them at 408 246 1800. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that story and explanation. I think everybody we will appreciate that. So just to follow up a little bit about that, about the etiquette and things like that. As you know, as with Halal Fest, we work with a lot of different business owners. From full restaurants to food trucks to mom and pop police people, people and home cooks and things like that. I've talked to a lot of different business owners, and a lot of things, common issues come up when it comes to certification. So, um, one of them, and I'm not gonna mention any business owners' names or anything as well, but I have mentioned this to Mufti Nana and others before in the past, is that a lot of times um, the business owners are kind of stuck in a situation where if there's only one or two approved suppliers, they are kind of dependent on that supplier, right? So, for example, there was a recent restaurant and who was HFSA certified, and then recently it was, and again, I appreciate what Hafsa does, and I'm not one of the hardcore followers of Hafsa, but I do appreciate what they do, and I know it's a thankless job, so I know what you guys go through, and I appreciate that. But some things I disagree with how things are done. So one of them things is like they post something on Facebook or social media that this restaurant is no longer Hafsa certified, and I understand that you have obligation to do that. But in this particular case, I talked to the restaurant owner directly after I saw that, and he said, "You told me that in this case he was getting his beef from Harris Ranch. That's one of the hand cut certified suppliers, and Harris Ranch, even though he's regularly ordering from them, they had some kind of delay for over 10 days, right? So he wasn't able to get that particular hand cut certified meat from them to run his business, right? So he had to go to another supplier and get another hand cut halal beef for his to make up for the fact that he couldn't get the beef from Harris Ranch. For he can't run his business with waiting for 2 weeks to get the meat from them, right? So because of that issue, according to what he told me, is that he had to go somewhere else. And I know a lot of other restaurant owners do this sometimes. And then obviously because of that, even though it was still hand cut halal beef, it's not one of the brands that were certified by HFSAA, so they took away the certification. So one thing that I would, again, I mentioned this to other people as well in the HFSAA organization, is if there's a way that HFSAA as an organization can talk to the suppliers to make things easier for the business owners, because HFSA is the major organization and they have a little bit more influence, especially now that you have grown so much over the past, decade or 14, 15 years now, right? So you should be able to at least uh, put a little bit of pressure on the suppliers. That's what my point is, that hey, make sure that we're bringing you guys customers, right? We're bringing you guys customers who are purchasing meat from you guys, so you got to make sure that if they're ordering, you got to keep them supplied. And then so that's one point I have. And then on the other side, I would say come up with a program where instead of automatically cutting off the certification of a restaurant that is going through this type of issue, it's kind of not their fault, right? They were they have to run their business, and because they couldn't get it from this supplier. So that's what I would say, hey, before you publicly put on social media that hey, these guys are no longer certified, we should try to work with them to try to help them out and get another alternative source, right? Get an alternative source that is certified so that you can keep them under the HFSA certification.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you bringing some of those comments or concerns to light. One thing I'll just say is it is our standard policy, and of course, these things can be case specific. So I don't want to, dive too deeply into that. But what I would say is that it is our standard practice policy that if a product is approved by us, we will promote that product because we have oversight. We have the ability to vet the facility and see the slaughter practice and be able to have that open communication, open relationship with the facility, to see the products that are being the proteins that are being slaughtered there and harvested. So first and foremost, I think that if a store owner is purchasing products that are approved by our organization and HFSA, then we do allow that store to continue their certification process. The second part of that is if the process of decertification is not really sort of kind of like a shotgun decision. Actually, it actually goes through two different chains of approval in order to get to that point, and usually takes over a week unless there's been a gross violation. And what I mean by that is a gross violation being, for example, a product which is, totally does not meet our standards, and the store already purchased it and they've already started supplying, on their customers with it. It is our policy that is both communicated at the time of certification, as well as at the time of decertification, that anytime a product which is not approved by our organization is already cut and served and produced and put out, gets served, we have the right to remove certification. And the reason for that is because the consumers that are now patronizing your restaurant are doing so because of the idea that it is a hand slaughtered product or products that are approved by the organization. And while there may be consumers that are not only worried about hand slaughtered, the point of the contract is to ensure that authenticity. So the decertification process is not so cut and paste that it's just like, hey, you know what? I feel like you purchased from someone else. I don't like that. Let's just call it. And I'll also add to that point that there is deliberation that goes into ensuring that that product is approved. And usually before we remove certification, we have an entire sort of thorough process of offering other alternative products. We offer them all the other products that were available on the market, even if it may be slightly more expensive, or if it's in another state, or if it's another distributor who can provide it. We do all the back end research to ensure that the store owner can still maintain a hand soldered product at whatever reasonable price that they can manage to get it, so that they don't have to cut off their supply and that they're not left stranded. And so, while unfortunate in this particular person's case, I would also just say that we always take our time to be deliberate about the removal of certification, especially when we know that the business is in full operation, or they're not doing as well, or whatever is going on. We always take that consideration to ensure that we try to provide them with a resource before that. But certain times it is just the case that it reaches critical mass, and as an organization, we have to be genuine to our cause and genuine to the original message of the organization, which is to maintain a certain code of ethics and a certain standard by which we want all our stores to abide by. And if at any point we find that there is a gross violation of that, although again, it's bitter because you don't want to see that happen and you don't want to cause anybody any harm, but that is the original agreement that these store owners do sign when they come on board, that is explained to them. And so, like I said, we try our absolute best to be there for them, to provide products for them, to provide resources and alternatives. But if at the end of the day the order is already the product is already ordered, the product is already in line or being produced or being sold, and it does violate because it doesn't meet the standards that we are looking for, then unfortunately for those reasons we will have to remove the certification. So
Just a
it
quick
is
follow-up.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up to that. So do you explain that process of getting alternative suppliers ahead of time, like at the
Yeah,
beginning?
definitely. So what
Mhm.
we generally, our practice is such that when we send the first inspector, and I guess this goes into what certification looks like and how we do that whole process. So I'll kind of segue it into that. But the idea here is that let's say we get an interested business for certification. They submit an application via the website. It comes in. The first thing we do is email communication on what are your current suppliers. And that's the first step in the vetting process to see whether it meets the HFSAA standards for hand cut, verification, no cross contamination, making sure all the processes are in line. Once that, we're able to support them with email communication, meaning let's say all their proteins already check out. It's already those hand cut products that we approve of. Then we send our inspector to do a site visit. So the inspector will go do a site visit. He'll check invoices. He'll check the facility. He'll look at all the dry ingredients, the wet ingredients. He'll look at all the proteins. He'll take pictures of all those items. We'll take a inventory of all those items. We'll take it back. The research team that I mentioned earlier, now they'll go through the whole thing. It takes approximately about a week, depending on the ingredients and the number of ingredients. They'll vet all the products. They'll go through every single one. And then at that time, offer replacement products, for example, alternatives to, let's say, a sauce you really wanted, or you wanted a particular something, and you wanted a barbecue sauce, but this one has wine in it, and so you want another one. So we'll do the back end research and provide you the resources, like the alternatives. Then when the store owner makes those changes, then they contact us again, and then we send the inspector for the second round, ensuring everything has now been switched if it needs to be switched. And then what we do is then we move forward with the contract. The contract is sent to them. They sign the contract. They send it back. And then shortly thereafter, we announce it publicly that this business gets established and gets certified. After that, but during this process, rather, we explain to the store owner that if at any point any of your proteins, chicken, lamb, beef, you are unable to find from the list of products that we supply you with, that we've done our research on, that we've verified, that we've approved, if at any point you have a difficulty in finding, and that's usually what we do, we send them 5 or 6 different products with different distributors, with different places you can purchase them at, so that they always have that list from day one. And then we tell them that if somehow or another, all of those products you're finding difficulty in finding an alternative for, just reach out to us. We'll find another way. There are some local slaughterhouses here in the Bay Area in particular, right? In Northern California, I should say, that we can place an order from and get it within a couple of days. There are places that do offer those type of services. Now, whether or not the costs are whatever they are, that's something which is an inevitable fact with hand cut, and especially with the rates of inflation as they are today. But for the most part, that's done in the beginning of the certification process. We offer the alternatives and we provide the list for it. And at any point, if the store owner is struggling, we also try to provide them some resources. The challenge oftentimes that comes up is that certain store owners in that time or in that process will struggle with finding a product, and they'll purchase the product and start selling it without notifying the inspector. And like I mentioned, we do have this ongoing sort of reminder with our inspectors and the store owners that, hey, look, we're here for you in any capacity. If you need support, we're here for you. If you need an alternative product, we're here for you. And as a matter of fact, there was one particular store owner that did reach out to Hafsa and to some of the masjids and said, hey, look, our business isn't doing so good. We'd love your support. And the masajid and the imams, we actually, they went out of their way to make announcements and said, hey, guys, go support so-and-so business. They're not doing so good. As a Muslim community, we should support our Muslim businesses. And there was tremendous support for that business. So we love to see that happen. We love to see that support and that growth and that development. But like I said, sometimes with those obstacles, when we're put in a position where a store owner is like, look, I have too much customers, I have too much demand, I'm going to switch my product. You figure it out for yourself. At that point, yes, I understand it puts Hafsa in a very tough position because it's a beloved restaurant, for example, or it's a restaurant where we try to keep the honor of the businesses by not mentioning the reason for their decertification. We leave that to the store owner and the individual customer. I know that some people request, and people request all the time, let us know why. But you have to understand from this point of view, like I had mentioned, when Mufti Abdullah had told me originally that the goal of our organization is to just provide resources for people to eat based on the standards that we are sharing, then putting them on blast on social media and saying this is why they lost certification, etc., this is just going to further hurt the business, right? So we consider it a amicable way, as amicable as it can be, to decertify a business and leave the rest of that, because it's sufficient for us a responsibility to mention that they've lost certification, the details of which they can inquire if they really want to on their own from the store owners. But that's sort of a service that we hope to try to provide for these businesses so that they can continue to function in their own right, in their own capacity.
Thank you very much. Sorry, one more question on this topic. Sorry, Abbas, I'm taking your time here. Uh, but just to follow up on this, so let's say the restaurant has been decertified. So is there any kind of process by Hafsa to connect with them again to see if they can get them back on board and help them in the
Absolutely. So
process?
we do have a general policy, and that is that if a store loses certification, we won't renew them until the new calendar year. And that's just an internal policy. It's easier for tracking and also gives us some time to kind of work with the store owner. We are inundated with a ton of different responsibilities at the same time. So if a store loses certification, it takes away from the credibility of the organization and the auditors if we recertify them right away. So we have a general internal policy that we have to wait one calendar year before reapplication. But at that time, we actually have a few stores in the Bay Area that did this, and they ended up going through the wait list process, and then they reapplied in the new calendar year, and they're still certified. And it was a decision that they had to make at that time, whatever it was. But we informed the community. Well, we informed the store owner rather that, look, this is our policy. You understand it's going to be difficult. That if you believe it'll be difficult, we're sorry, but due to whatever circumstances happen that we remove the certification, we can't reissue it until the new calendar year. And then at the same time, when they apply, we're right there to help them again, provide them whatever support they need, resources, to try to avoid the issues that took place in the first place that got them to lose the certification. At no point has Hafsa ever really said no to any business seeking to get certified. Um, I guess this is a good place to mention this as well, which is, oftentimes people say that, hey, there's a certification fee, and, we're concerned that that's going to make it difficult for us. And you know what? Again, to each their own. I'll be very transparent about it. For all our stores and grocery stores, restaurants and grocery stores that get certified, we have a $25 a month certification fee. That goes to really cover the expenses of our inspectors who do the weekly audits. And they take time out of their day. And honestly, especially with the Bay Area or Northern California, there's a lot of driving, there's a lot of places to go to. And honestly, it doesn't even cover the true expenses. But we do offer that, we do have that, but we have never rejected a certification due to lack of funds, due to the $25 a month fee per certification per month. That amounts to about $300 in the year. And we've never, if a restaurant owner literally told us, I can't afford $25 a month, I would say, hey, let's get all your products onboarded. Let's make sure you are in line with the certification, and we'll delay it. Let's do 6 months deferment. And we've done that in the past. We've done that for store owners, we've done that for grocery stores, we've done that for restaurants, where we will defer the certification fee for a couple of months, until they're comfortable with it. And then we'll check back in. Hey, it's the 6 month mark. We'd like to start from now. Some store owners are like, yeah, you know what? I'm doing good. Thank you so much. That was just a little help and we appreciate it. Others have even told us, we need another 6 months. And we oblige them because, again, the point is this is not a money making scheme. This isn't one of those things where there's a lack of transparency. This is just really for people who, for example, like myself, who only stick to the hand slaughter process, want to know with certainty that I can go to a store and eat only hand slaughtered products. So, yeah, I hope that answers a couple of questions.
Yes, it did.
I really appreciate that, and Irfan, thanks for the drilling down into some of these questions as well. And we really were getting a chance to see the nuts and bolts of what goes into the certification,
Absolutely, absolutely.
the decertification, the recertification, all of the different levels and processes of that. And this is really good for the community to know. But even beyond that, I think what's really striking is that I'm really grateful in seeing also the ethos, the philosophy, the adab and the akhlaq behind what's going on. And I mean, ultimately, when it comes down to it, someone who's eating hafsa is because they truly believe in a very traditional perspective. They have very strong belief, and let's be honest, doing all that work, it's a lot of work for the average consumer. Right. I mean, it's a lot of work for you guys, and this is the work that you're doing. Everything that you describe, it sounds like a lot of work, and so you're doing this so that other people don't have to, and that's an amazing service, and then that's a really phenomenal endeavor. And for people that have complaints about hafsa, don't eat hafsa. Then it's not that hard.
Right.
It's not. It's really it's really simple, right? And so, but we're living in this age of social media, and unfortunately, a lot of times, Hafsa does get a bad rap online, and a lot of this is because it's not clear if people who talk about Hafsa are actual representatives of Hafsa or they're not. Because a lot of people will, come on as experts and start talking, and you're like, oh, this is some guy from the organization talking. And then they start saying something really out of pocket, right? I'll give a couple examples just so that I'd love to give you a chance to address these issues, and so that folks are aware of what is Hafsa and what is not Hafsa, right? I'll give you a couple examples. There's one example where a restaurant owner actually had complained to me, and their restaurant has now shut down, unfortunately. Said that someone called and berated them for a full half hour on the phone, saying that because you are not carrying hand slaughtered, because you're not even trying to go for Hafsa certification, this restaurant is not halal. Berated this female restaurant owner, basically saying, right, that you're feeding the community haram. And this completely broke her spirit. And the whole time on the call, he's saying, get Hafsa, get Hafsa, get Hafsa, right? So now in her mind, as she's talking to me, it's like, wow, these guys are real bullies. Or similarly on the Facebook group chat, on Instagram, wherever you find social media, a lot of people will say, oh, you're eating machine slaughtered, that is not halal, this is a haram restaurant. They'll pass that judgment, and they'll take it a step further and actually mock or berate or insult others, and saying, you call yourself Muslim, you're not even eating, hand slaughtered. And so it really gets down to that point. I'm wondering, first of all, why do you think that even is? Why do you think that it gets to that point? And second of all, just want to give you a chance to address these things also from an official Hafsa standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I had mentioned earlier, none of this is in line with the organization at any point.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, I mean, like I said, 15 years ago, Mufti Abdullah told me that's not our goal. That's been the policy ever since, and I've stuck true to that as much as I could, as much as we can. Right? I'll even
Mhm.
take you. I'll take that up one, Abbas, where I had a store owner tell me come to his store for certification. I said, oh, absolutely. Drove 40 minutes to his store. He has all machine slaughter products in his store. And I said, oh, well, brother, the point of the organization is that we only approve of hand slaughtered products. It was a grocery store. So I said, we only approve hand slaughtered products. If you'd like, I can work with you. I can find you some suppliers. I kid you not, right? He grabs me by my forearm very, very like harshly and pulls me towards him so that I'm like within a couple inches of his face. And he says to me, he says, don't play games with me. Give me the certificate and I'll deal with this later.
Wow.
So I respectfully, I mean, in that moment, you would imagine, hey, look, he put hands on me. He got real
Wow.
physical with me.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
I
intense.
wouldn't be surprised if someone reacted, right, in a very not so akhlaq way, right? But
Hmm.
I didn't feel the need to respond that way because I knew, like, everything here is on record. So I just said, listen, respectfully, please don't put your hands on me. I said, we can help you when it comes to the certification. But beyond that, none of this is going to work in any type of bullying fashion. That's not how things work. You're not going to buy an inspector. None of that kind of stuff goes, right? This isn't that,
Right.
right? And even if, let's just throw out crazy hypotheticals, even if you bought me out, I'm not the guy. I'm not the only guy that has to approve this. There's a tier to this, right? I got supervisors that need to approve my submission of a restaurant. So they're going to look at me and be
Hmm.
like, where's all the data? Where's all the invoices? Where's all the pictures that we normally go by? So
Yeah.
going back to your original point, that absolutely Hafsa does not condone any of this type of behavior, right? Like I said, though, there are people that are extremely into making sure they only eat hand slaughtered. And we always tell people, whenever we do our educational programs, whenever we do our community open house, whenever we do our workshops or seminars or symposiums nationally, we always tell people, you should speak to store owners. If you disagree with them because they have machine slaughter, then
Yeah.
politely speak to them. Maybe that
Yeah.
will convince them to change, perhaps, right? But if you hold views that machine slaughter is haram, then okay, that's your personal view. You can hold that and don't eat there. Just like if you also disagree with some of the policies of Hafsa, that's okay. Don't engage, don't follow us, right? Don't
Right.
try to cause political drama or arguments or conflicts, etc. Because the objective here is to get stores to promote the hand slaughtered product because it's a universal product for everybody. Whereas
Yeah.
those who follow, any deviation from that, then that becomes a slightly smaller demographic. So again, I feel terrible that this woman had to experience this thing, whether it's on the phone, in person, online. Again, we have to remember though, like, even though you feel very strongly about something, the best example for us in our entire life and everything we do is the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So where in that does berating a store owner come from? What did you hope to achieve by doing that? To me that just sounds
Hmm.
like an angry uncle, like an angry like my dad when he gets mad or something, right? Like he's gonna yell at me like, didn't I tell you to clean up your room and like this, that, and the other. Like that seems like a very different relationship than how you would want to like actually get somebody to switch over. Even if you were
Yeah.
to give somebody dawah to come to Islam, right? Nobody's gonna go really and just start like kind of like poking fun of other people and like putting them down and making them feel terrible. That's not gonna get anybody on your side. But rather you
Yeah.
get people on your side. I mean, subhanallah, there's a famous hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentions that إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that
Mm.
the one of the sole objectives of why I was sent as a Nabi was to perfect moral character. So
Mm.
if that was one of the objectives of Nubuwa was perfection of moral characters and to remove evil qualities, then that is something that as an individual Muslim we should be concerned that how we are acting with other Muslims is not reflective of our religion at all. Um, Of course, Hafsa, like I mentioned again, just to be extremely clear, doesn't condone that. And even those people that are gung ho like that, we tell people, look, even if you're a Hafsa supporter, you're not helping. You know, and that
Yeah, exactly.
that's not the help that we need. Help that we would need would be like you go and say, "Can I speak to the store owner? I'd like to share with you that my personal views. I live here, for example. I live down the street. I really want to eat your food at this restaurant. It looks so amazing, looks so delicious. It's just that I have a limitation because I only eat hand slaughtered. So and
Mm.
even if he disagrees with you, at least there won't be animosity. At least there won't be hatred. At least, and maybe the store owner will learn something new. Maybe the store
Mhm.
owner will share, hey, I didn't even know that was a thing, and you open up a new channel of communication. That's such a beautiful, organic, nice, kind way to carry a conversation and to potentially encourage a store owner to
Mm.
change suppliers. And who knows, maybe maybe that's the type of kindness that they need and to switch over, right? So
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
it's an unfortunate situation, set of situations, but it's not encouraged, and nobody from Hafsa's end would ever sort of, at least nobody officially associated to the organization would ever act in such a harsh and inappropriate way, or at least I would
Yeah.
strongly hope so. Yeah.
It's education and etiquette. It's really funny because it's a few years ago, and I say funny now because I can laugh about it. At the time, it was a little stressful, but I remember we had a lot of drama in the Facebook group, basically about the etiquette of like how do you convey this message to other people? Like, hey, I'm hand slaughtered, you're machine slaughtered. We're not gonna get along. You
Mm,
know, I'm gonna bully this page, this post, this restaurant, and so we were really cracking down on this because we want to create a
mm,
peaceful space. And the funniest thing to this day is they ended up, it was like a small group of people. They ended up creating a Facebook group called Bay Area Hand Slaughtered Halal Foodies,
mm.
copying everything from my logo to my description to my banner, everything to the T. They're like, you know what, we're just gonna make our own group. I'm like, all right, fine. That group is not really active anymore, so we'll see in the long run. But it's very clear that a lot of people are acting out of spite, out of resentment, out of
Right.
these a lot of these issues. Which I think if we ate less red meat, maybe we would have less intense emotions. Anyways, but anyways, that's not
I mean,
that's
I,
neither
I
No,
here
will.
nor
I will
no,
add.
brother.
I'll maybe
That's
apropos to
going
what
too far. That's going too far, brother. Don't say that.
I would just add maybe I think especially with these social media platforms, obviously the challenges you get is that you're not face to face, right? So you feel emboldened, you feel so much more courageous to say certain things, and you might not say that in front of somebody, right? You might not have the audacity to say that in front of somebody. I think I personally hold the view that if a store posts online, hey, with this a new store, or I just ate at this new restaurant, and the community asks, well, do you know if it's hand slaughtered or machine slaughtered? My personal view on that is that's helpful for me to know. But I think when it goes beyond just that and it starts to go, like you had mentioned, into bullying, name calling, putting people down, absolutely. I myself, and I'm sure others in Hafsa also hold this view that that's not in line with any of our Islamic methodology or practice. It's not within the spirit of the Sunnah. It's not acceptable, right? Because you're hurting another Muslim, and to hurt another Muslim or to harm another Muslim is haram. So I think that there are certain degrees of communication that sadly a lot of people lack. The awareness or the emotional awareness to sort of put that into perspective. Person's trying to do their best, they're working hard. That's okay. Let me try to support that person. This kind of reminds me of a famous story that once someone came to Imam Ghazali and they said, "Oh, great Sheikh, so and so person is not coming to the masjid no more for prayer. What's the fatwa on him?" Right? He's not coming to the masjid for prayer. What's the fatwa on him? And all everybody's just sitting there eagerly waiting for the big fatwa, right? Like, like we're gonna mob him. We're gonna go. Let's take the mob. We're gonna go pitchforks and burn down his house and get him and drag him to the. So the sheikh said, the fatwa is, you ready for this? The fatwa is that you go and you gently grab his hand and you walk with him to the masjid. That's the fatwa. And everyone was just like, oh. And it's like, yeah, we're not trying to harm anybody. If the guy's going through something, let's go check out what the situation is. Let's go see how he's doing. Maybe he couldn't make it to the masjid because he got sick. Maybe he was going through financial difficulties, right? So it's counterintuitive to how a lot of people function and act nowadays, But that's the point of these reminders and this education and understanding the spirit behind it, right? It's not just a matter of like literally just I'm only eating this thing, but there's a spirit behind it. It has an effect on us. So if in the example of Imam Ghazali, the person's not coming to the masjid, so the fatwa isn't, go burn him down, call him, leave bad Yelp reviews and, scream at him, but rather it's gently go take his hand and say, hey, let's go to the masjid together. I haven't seen you in a while. Let's go hang out. Let's go pray salah and we'll talk afterwards. Right. And in the example of the restaurant owner, it's, hey, I don't personally eat machine slaughtered meat. I would love it if you could try to bring that product into your restaurant. I'd love to connect you with the people who can facilitate that for you. Where's the harm in that, right? Really, I mean, we can never avoid unsolicited advice, right? No matter where you are in life. I'm a marriage counselor by profession and trade. People ask me all the time, like, oh, why do people giving me advice on how to live my marriage? I'm like, look, you're getting mad at the wrong thing. People will always give you advice, right? Have a kid here and don't have a kid now. Or why aren't you having kids? Or why aren't you married? People will never stop that. But the better way to look at it is, despite all the unsolicited advice, how am I in my marriage going to, what of that advice am I going to take and implement? That I will consult with my partner. So in the same thing in the matter of food, right? It's a better way to have that conversation with gentleness, with kindness, and to just be direct about it.
Very good.
Absolutely. I
Very good.
totally agree with that. I don't know how Irfan feels. We have a boxer behind him and a sword behind him. He's ready to fight. That red meat, man. I'm telling you.
Okay, so we kind of over an hour, but I'll just have one last question. I mean, I have multiple more questions, but I'll just keep it to one last one since I know everybody has to go. Um, recently, on the WhatsApp group, we had some discussions about, eating from the people of the book. So, can you give us a quick 2-minute version of what is your opinion as a mufti? You're a mufti now, so give us what's your fatwa on that.
So what I'll say is I'll respond in sort of what I'll put it this way. The best answer I can give, that's probably the most the simplest, but the most that makes the most sense, is that first and foremost we have to understand that when you don't live in America and you're not from here, taking fatwas from outside of the country is against the principles of fatwa, right? When you have qualified muftis and scholars in the country or the city that you're from, you take from those people first. That's kind of policy number one. Point number two is the idea that America is a Christian country is a hotly debated issue, namely because the founding fathers who literally got together and came here and created this country and the Constitution, they had absolutely no intention of keeping this, of this being a Christian nation. That wasn't their intent.
Right.
Their
Secular
intent,
nation.
it had absolute. They say, actually, there was a CNN article on this that talked about what were the founding fathers' actual intentions behind the formation of this nation, and the main idea was for them to function, to run their businesses, to run and do things freely, away from the church. They wanted to do things freely. So actually, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to misquote. I think it was either Benjamin Franklin or one of the other founding fathers who actually said, I don't care if my neighbor has worships a single god or 20 gods. It is of no interest to me at all. And on that, it was also mentioned that one of the other founding fathers said that I don't consider this a Christian nation, but rather a nation of Christians. And the point that he was trying to make by making that statement was that was never the intention. It just so happened to be that a bunch of Christians ended up coming here, but that was never the intention of the foundation of this country. So that's just a historical fact. An additional point that I'll add to that is, even if hypothetically you want to say that America is a Christian country, does America follow Christian values? Is policy in line with Christian values and ordeals? Absolutely not. The whole concept of a separation of church and state exists in America. They're telling you, we don't want that association. So we're hearing this firsthand from the Christian community, from all the branches of Catholicism and Christianity that are openly saying this is not a Christian country. right? And we don't follow those belief systems. So first and foremost, from the top down government level, there is no engagement or involvement of the Christian values. The second thing is also, right? The second thing is also is that in terms of their practices, there's interest, right, in the banking system. So usury exists. Slaughter method is not in line with anything that's kosher or that you would say is from the practice of Ahlul Kitab, right? The practice of Ahlul Kitab would be to slaughter the animal, taking the name of God at the time of slaughter, and the rabbi or the priest is slaughtering the animal. That doesn't happen. In modern commercial slaughterhouses in America, that doesn't happen. That's considered too slow. If they're going to do that, might as well just do halal. And clearly, we don't see them doing halal, right? So this is really important to understand that I actually implore people to try to call a slaughterhouse, a beef slaughterhouse, halal or not, and just to go see what that process looks like, right? And I'll maybe end on this note that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when Muslims were eating, some of the meat from the Ahlul Kitab, the Jews or the Christians, you have to understand, right? There was no difference between the way they killed an animal and the way that Muslims killed an animal, because their belief was one, that there's a single solitary God. They believed that they were monotheistic in nature and in tradition and religion, and they all killed the animals in the same way, right? As opposed to some pagans who actually don't kill animals in the same way, right? Hindus, for example, engage in a type of slaughter known as jatka. And jatka is a solitary blow, or ideally a solitary blow to the back of the neck with the machete while the animal is fully awake and sort of almost in a state of awe, seeing a crowd. That's not okay, right? Mongolians, especially Mongolian and polytheists, right? The traditionalists, they're sort of like they worship the spirit and the animals. They actually kill their animals by making a small incision in the lower abdomen and taking out the intestines and tying it back up and allowing the animal to die in its pain in that process. And they consider the meat to be some kind of a delicacy. That's their method of slaughter or kill, right? So if something like that were to take place, both Muslims and Jews and Christians would have seen that and says, oh no, we don't, that's not the way of our kill, right? So the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims all were killing with a sharp blade, taking the name of God, cutting the throat, the jugular, and ensuring the animal bled out. And unfortunately, we don't see any of that really happening in America, with the exception of very small, maybe Orthodox Jewish slaughterhouses that do that, and Muslims. And so, I mean, there's so much more to be said about this, but I think, unfortunately, stuff that gets spread online should stay online and should not get put into practice. It's caused a ton of harm, and maybe we need another podcast just to answer that question. So,
yeah, seriously, that's a lot of great history I didn't know. And Irfan, that's so not fair, man. You can't ask such a profound question and be like, all right, 2-minute answer.
2-minute quick summary. Yeah. Oh, that was good. That was good. I think it's good summary. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
One last question here. In the future, with AI, if they come with robots and they have their own consciousness and they have a knife in their hand, and does that count as hand slaughtered?
AI slaughtered lab-grown meat. Let's go.
the muftis are gonna have a field day with that question. So,
bro, I'm hungry for a bid'ah burger, man. Let's get as much of these innovations as we can. So, Hamza, I know we covered a lot of really heavy topics. I'm very grateful, and I want to end on maybe a lighthearted note. What did the buffalo say to his child when he dropped him off at the college dorm?
Bye, son.
Bye, son. And with that, we say bye to all of the people who've been listening. And really, if you have any questions about Hafsa, reach out to Hafsa. If you can't reach out to Hafsa, reach out to us and we'll connect you, because really, if you hear something, there's this quote from Imam Ali Aslam, and I'll end with this. He says, the difference between the truth and falsehood is 4 fingers. It's a difference between seeing something and hearing something. So if you hear something, verify it. That's the moral of today's story.
We are so grateful for Shaykh Jabir and all the efforts of Hafsa in serving the needs of the Muslim community. We are excited to continue exploring the halal industry from various angles throughout Season 3, so stay tuned for more.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Artistic Foodies. And before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Be sure to find us on Facebook and Instagram to stay tuned for more episodes as well as bonus content. You can also have access to all of our episodes at theartisticfoodies.com.
This podcast has been brought to you by HalalFest Incorporated and GAMA, gathering all Muslim artists.